So I am Blake Hutchins, sales engineer for Tufin, based out of Atlanta, Georgia. Hope everybody's doing safe and well in this time. Quick little agenda. We're going to talk about COVID-19 coronavirus impact on cybersecurity, signs that automation, security policy automation is needed. What is security policy, use cases, and then the Tufin value. So what have we seen from the cybersecurity network policy company with regards to COVID-19 coronavirus, right? We've seen the increase in cyber attacks and risk. Everybody knows that the workplace has been shoved in a box, turned upside down and shaken a few times. Everybody's work patterns, where they're working from, how they're doing their job it's just chaotic. We're seeing teams and staffs that were already short-staffed, understaffed, and just now being stretched even further. Where from a sales engineer perspective, some of my customers and clients I'm calling on are just running faster than they've ever run in their entire careers. Budget cuts, supply chain failures like I've never seen before. I've been doing this since 1999, have not seen anything that comes close to this. And then we'll just skip the news one. Impact on cybersecurity. This chart shows phishing attacks in Italy and the number of searches based on coronavirus COVID-19. It's very interesting to see from early January through mid-March, just the sheer increase of what the attackers know is current, what the hackers know is on everybody's mind. They're looking for money just the same way everybody else is. And that just massive spike. And what has this led to from a company's perspective, right? It's led for the need to do more with less. Everybody has had to send workers home. Everybody's had to somehow react to, I can't run a business the same way I've run a business for the previous X number of years. So I have to now all of a sudden shift my entire workforce to not only have IT guys who are used to working from home, but now everybody else who has never worked from home. A large percentage of workforce goes in at 8 a.m., leaves at 5 p.m., and they don't work after that. And that's fine. That's what some people do for a living. That's their job. But now they have no way to go in at 8 a.m. and work till 5 p.m. So those people are now having to work out of their office, home office, wherever they may be. And what is that leading to? So it's leading to people who have never used a VPN before, who have never had to worry about those credentials. They are no longer separated by a layer 2 VLAN and routing and switching in the office. They're now having to put up monitors, desktops, workstations from home. They're having to juggle daycares being closed, loved ones being sick, and they're having to figure out how to rework. And that's leading to VPN tickets. That's leading to remote access. That's leading to shortages. And it's also leading to the IT personnel themselves having to no longer have an office to go to. Most IT personnel are used to working from home. I think most of them, are used to, hey, I stayed up till 2 a.m., did a firewall config, I'm gonna just work from home the next day. What they're not used to working from home with is a spouse, 1, 2, 3 kids, daycare is closed, school closed, homeschooling. And that's leading to a large number of tickets that are coming back wrong. It's leading to frustrations. Hey, I'm trying to push a firewall change, and all of a sudden my 4-year-old walks in screaming that he needs his, his blanket and his milk. So how can all this be prevented? Security policy automation. Let's go through 5 signs of security policy automation and why it's needed. Step 1, change processes are slow and manual. This is one, as a sales engineer, that I spend a lot of time with prospective customers, clients today, is how do you complete change task? Take me from end user asking from a simple source A, destination B ticket to it being able to be implemented. And the process answer that I get is different from a manager to an end user admin, because there's a gap and nobody really knows how everybody does it. And you can ask 5 people on the same team and they'll all give you a different answer of what their process is for implementing simple firewall changes. One person does it this way, one person does it that way. This guy's been here 20 years, so he does it a different way and he knows how it should be done. but nobody in there is doing it the exact same way. And what it leads to is rules that get open a little permissive. It leads to rules that aren't done correctly. It leads to people who get mad at security and firewall teams and admins. Cloud first initiatives are also changing. Everybody knows that somebody in your organization is either looking at or has looked at the cloud in some shape, form, or fashion. And from a traditional network firewall guy, this scares a lot of us, because if we do the quote unquote traditional lift and shift from, I'm just going to take firewalls, stick them everywhere, I'm going to do layer 3 access lists, I'm going to do what I need to do, we're not taking advantage of cloud the way it should be taken ahead of. We're not using automation. We're not using run books and scripts and DevOps. Plus, from traditional networking, we don't know how to see into it. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what's there. We can work with dev teams, security teams to push network policy automation to help with that. Sign 3 is kind of a little bit of 1 and 2, right? So what's happening? I took too long. I didn't know what to do with the change. I was a little afraid to make it. So I'm just going to go spin this up in Amazon. Or Susie from accounting saw, hey, on a commercial, I can go do this in Azure with just my credit card. It's a lot quicker for me to go onboard that than it is for waiting for a ticket, go through, arguing with them. I don't know what I'm asking for. Shadow IT is a real problem with businesses as they exist today. And this is just accumulations of steps 1, 2, and 3. The hole is getting deeper. What happens to that admin who's now working from home? He's got screaming 3-year-olds wanting their milk. He's tired. His world has kind of been turned upside down, and he's still trying to do a firewall rule that's not working or hasn't been done correctly. Well, he takes that rule and he makes it a little more permissive. He doesn't, or she doesn't, realize where they've put it in the firewall, and they've made a shadowed rule. That is a rule that is covered by a previous rule that does the same exact network functions. So what's the outcome? The outcome is the firewall went from a little secure, somewhat messy, to now I'm working from home, it's chaos, and I'm just going to knock one big massive hole in there and let it be. And then where does this lead to? It leads to audits that are failed. It leads to audits that can't be done in time. It leads to security breaches that can't be survived. Because if I don't have time to do it correctly the first time, when all this gets back to normal and I'm doing my day job and everything has come back to somewhat quote unquote normal, do I have time to go through and figure out which rules were put in the past 4 or 5 months? I had a conversation with a customer just the other day. I said, we don't need network automation, we're good. I said, well, can you tell me the changes you've made since this coronavirus, COVID-19 has taken place? No. Can you tell me who approved all your changes? No. Well, then you need network security policy automation. So why now? What's driving this to all of a sudden bubble up and lead to it? Enterprise networks aren't getting any smaller. They're not getting any easier. They're not getting any simpler. Less than 1% of the companies that Tufin deals with have a single firewall vendor, a single network vendor, and a concrete plan for putting changes in, looking at them, and reviewing them, and auditing firewalls. They're not there. Everybody has firewalls from vendors A, B, C. They have mergers and acquisitions. They have people that have come and gone, and the firewalls are a mess. That is the reason Tufin exists. Not only are the networks fragmented, but the processes are. Like I said earlier, if I can go to any company and say between 5 different admins, throw in a different business unit, throw in the server team, throw in the audit team, throw in HR. How do you get a new application stood up? I guarantee you every single one of those people will give you a different answer. Oh, I called Jim. I called Joe. I put a ticket in. I call, Larry, the CIO, because he knows me and my kids play softball together, so I get my ticket done in a hurry. Nobody does every ticket the exact same way. And what's happening? We're introducing SD-WAN. We're introducing zero trust. We're introducing cloud. We're introducing NSX container and microservices. Nothing is making these networks simpler. Nobody has time, the bandwidth, the headcount to go back and say, we're going to stop. We're going to stop doing business for 6 months. We're going to tear the network down. We're going to rebuild it correctly. We're going to document it. We're going to make everything pretty. And then going forward, we're going to do this the right way and make it work. It just doesn't exist. They're just getting bigger. They're getting wider. They're getting deeper. And then looking forward, software defined is not something that we think is just going to be another buzzword. It's here to stay. I started out my career in 1999, and if you had told me that software-defined networks would have existed back then, I would have laughed at you. Today, they are the norm. They're everywhere. They're staying, and so will automation and software-defined policy. How do I tell companies to proceed with automation? First one is get buy-in across the board. Go to the security team. Go to the, if you have a server team, go to the server team. Go to the developers. They're probably doing some of this with Jenkins, Circle CI, GitHub. Go to the auditors and say, hey guys, we're going to start doing automation. How can you help me? What have you done? What can I do to help you make this easier when it comes to firewall security policy? Don't try to boil the ocean. We had this conversation every time I talk to a company. That's cool and all, but there's no way I can get to that end goal. You're right. You can't go from step 1 to step 10 and make that work. But this isn't an automation-centric problem. This is the problem that's true for anything you look at. Start small. Start with the admins and engineers. What takes up the most of your time? Okay, when I get a ticket, I don't know where it goes on which firewall, so I go through and do a trace route or a path ping and try to figure out where it goes. That's something small to build on. Figure out those building blocks and eventually wind your way up to where it needs to go. And metrics. Metrics are one of the things that from a network guy, we like them, but we hate them because we like them because we can prove how awesome our network is, how fast our firewall is, how many packets we drop, how many stuff we do to prevent security breaches. But metrics outside of our cool things that we like, networks, we're not a fan of. Define metrics for things we know we can fix. If it takes 30 minutes for me to figure out all the firewalls that my change has to go across and automation can do it in 17 seconds, that is a very easy metric to define. It's a very easy metric to monitor. And then 30, 60 days from now, I can come back and say, I have shaved X number of time off of X number of tickets, and it's easy to go back to step 2 and keep building. Manage expectations. One of the things that I say numerous times a week is don't try to boil the ocean. And I've said it already twice in this one slide. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be things that don't go right along the way, but taking small steps and defining how I want to get there, we can get to the end goal of security policy automation. Focus on the firewall, focus on the security, focus on what needs to happen to clean up the firewall, to prevent unused rules, shattered rules, and how to get rid of them. All right, some use cases. These are the ones that I like because I'm a network guy at heart. Rule decommissioning. Again, this goes back to use case number 1. I'm at home. I have kids running around. My world's turned upside down. I'm just going to stick a firewall rule wherever I think it goes. I'm going to make this rule overly permissive. I don't really know what happens with it, so I'm just going to leave it there. Why don't firewall rules get cleaned up? Pretty honestly, it's CYA. It's somebody at one time pulled a rule out because they were trying to do the right thing and it broke application X, and now nobody touches the rules. So we're just going to leave them there. We had a major financial institution that had to decommission almost 18,000 rules from their Palo Alto devices. They came to us and said, this is going to take us years to accomplish. How can you help? So the Tufin rule decommissioning workflow was done in 30 days. And how does that work? We have a built-in GUI that shows me all of my rules across all of my security devices. Inside of here, I can run queries. In this simple example, I've run a permissive level high. So what is that saying? That's saying any rule that has an any in a source, destination, or a service, show it to me. One window, one query, and I have now seen all the rules that are very open to the world. I can layer on top of that stuff as last hit. Does it violate my security compliance? What ports does it use? I can take these rules, add them to a ticket, and then what do I want to do on the ticket? I want to decommission the rules. Very simple, few clicks. I add this to a workflow. The Tufin secure change workflow says, I see the checkpoint already, you want to put it on? I'm going to go through and disable these rules for you. What I also did was I got buy-in along the way with full audit and tracking. So I can see who asked for it, who approved it, who moved it to the next step, and then who eventually pushed the button to remove the rule. Go back to the use cases before, why do I need network policy automation? I've now covered 1, 4, and 5 on top of there. I've done it quickly, I've done it easily, and I have changed track of why it was done. Use case number 2. This is the one that I love the most. It's clone server. It is the age-old firewall admin ticket of, I spun up server X, please give it the same access as server Y. Server guys, developers, apps, they all think everybody out there can just go figure out what server Y had access to, and it takes about 5 minutes to go figure out what server X needs access to. That couldn't be further from the truth. This workflow helps. So you can see here, US Bank, 12,000 rules, 50 policies. They were going through a massive hardware expansion and server replacement. So what do? We create a workflow. And all I need in this workflow is the existing server IP address. So you can see in this example, 10.100.1.1 now is going to have the same access for 10.100, 1.2, 12.8, so forth and so on. It's that simple. I need old server, new server, and Tufin will go and find all the objects, all the rules, all the groups that that server's IP address lived in and clone it. It's called server clone for a reason, because that's what it does. It is going to search every firewall, every router and access list that you have onboarded inside of Tufin and add those in there with change tracking, approval, and who did what when we did it. This is your 90% of your tickets, access request. Source A, destination B, port C. The problem with it, as we discussed in use case 1 of why, or scenario 1 of why I need automation, how do I do it? And I ask people this all the time. How do you handle a change firewall ticket? And the answer I get most times is, well, I do a trace route. I do a ping. I log into a firewall and see if that's the right one. I go to the router of that subnet and then track my way back using route tables to find the firewall. Well, that takes a while. Yeah, that's mundane. Yeah, that's tedious, time-consuming, boring. Insert all the adjectives that you want there. They're all true. What if I could do all of those access steps, all of those requirements in minutes? And we've done this, and this is where you get admin engineer buy-in almost instantaneous. All I need in a firewall change request ticket, as you can see here, source, excuse me, a destination, and a service. With Tufin's topology, we will run the topology, we will find the targets, and then we will implement changes that need to be had. We don't need to know where the firewalls are. We don't need to know the application that makes it up. We don't need to know where it exists in the network. We just need source, destination, and port and protocol. And by the way, if we find in this little analysis here that Joey asked for source A, destination B, port C, and it already exists, Tufin will close his ticket, send Joey an email and say, Joey, your access has been granted, please test. Firewall engineers, admins no longer have to get a ticket, find out where it goes, log in. The good If they're following protocol, they're going to start to look through the firewall and see, does this access exist? Most times they've got a backlog of tickets. They're just going to throw it in there, put it somewhere in an access list. Hopefully it goes in the right place, and they're going to create a shadowed rule that doesn't need to be there. This can be solved in seconds. Tufin value, we kind of talked about this. Implement changes in minutes instead of days. When I tell clients and customers that, hey, no longer do you have to worry about this. No longer do you have to go and poke through every firewall. Let us just help you with this. Reduce complexity, ensure continuous compliance. If I have a set of standards that I'm always guarding against, it's no longer up to the 7, 8, 10, 20 admins who make firewall changes to say, this is risky. Should I put this in? Tufin can do that in a matter of minutes based on standards set forth by the business. And then do more with less. Multi-vendor technologies, distributed teams, traditional networks, all supported. It doesn't matter to us if you have one firewall vendor or 6 firewall vendors. It doesn't matter to us if you have 1 data center or 40 data centers. We can take your security policies, we can take your rule bases, we can automate the cleanup, the compliance, the deployment of all of those changes. That's it. Try to make the last one a little short and not take the full hour.